The movie unfolds in a maximum security prison where a gang is headed to the bathroom of a man known as Bone. Danny, Bone's friend, warns Bone that a gang outside wants to kill him, and as the gang members arrive at the bathroom, Danny exits. The gang leader tells Bone that he will regret not merging with them. Bone strips off his shirt and tells the gang leader that he is giving them a chance to escape. However, the gang leader mocks Bone's words. The gang leader attacks Bone, but he quickly fights back and stabs him. The gang members try to hit Bone, but he is skilled in combat and successfully strikes them down within seconds. He tells the gang leader that he must send a message to all those trying to harm him. Subsequently, Bone leaves prison and heads to a hotel to book a room. There, he meets the hotel manager named Tamara, who takes him to his room, telling him she does not want any trouble. He tells her he does not want any trouble either. Later, Bone goes to an arena where street fights are taking place. He watches two people fighting, then a luxury sedan arrives with James and his men. The organizer of the fights, a man named Pinball, announces the next match. The fight is between two fighters, one of whom works for James, named Hammerman, who has won all his fights without any defeats. As the fight between them begins, Hammerman fiercely strikes another fighter and wins the fight. Pinball then gives the stakes to James, who gets into the car and leaves the place. However, he is surprised to find Bone in the car, thinking Bone intends to rob him, but Bone requests that he arrange a fight with Hammerman for him. At first, Pinball refuses because he tells Bone that he is an unknown fighter and it would take a lot of money to organize the fight for him. Bone gives Pinball $250, telling him that it's all the money he has. We see James receiving a call from an important figure named Franklin, who orders James to eliminate a man named Daryl. James agrees, but he notices that Franklin is watching from his car. Pinball brings Bone in front of James, telling him that Bone is the new fighter. James notices Bone continuously staring at his girlfriend, Angela, and gets angry. James warns his friend Angela not to look at Bone like that. Pinball warns Bone not to repeat what he did with the girl. James and his men leave the place. Pinball organizes Bone's first fight with another fighter. The opponent is a very large man, but Bone notices that this man moves slowly. When the fight begins, Bone strikes the fighter and delivers a fatal blow, winning the fight within seconds. Pinball is pleased with Bone's victory and tells him he will organize fights outside the town to build his reputation, and then he will set up a match with Hammerman. Pinball tells Bone the story of James's friend Angela. He tells him she was married and pregnant with another man's child, but James, after planning a murder to get her husband incarcerated, forcibly took her away from her husband. He tells him that James is hiding Angela and her child in an unknown location, and Angela has turned to drugs, her life becoming miserable. James and his men are having dinner with Daryl and his girlfriend when Franklin orders him to dump her. James asks Daryl's girlfriend to play music. Then he sings and asks everyone to sing along. But suddenly, James pulls out a sword and stabs Daryl, then asks Hammerman to turn up the music and beats Daryl until he kills him. We see Bone in his hotel room. When James sees Angela, he is angry that she has not given him any attention. The next day, James and one of his men, Teddy, are together, and Teddy shows a video of Bone's victorious fight. James asks him to gather all information about Bone. At the hotel, we see Tamara noticing Gerard meeting with street gangs, so she tells him to stay away from them. Roberto asks them to leave the place, but they refuse and continue cursing Roberto. Then Bone arrives and they quickly run away. Pinball takes Bone in the car, and they go to another place to watch street fights. There, two girls are fighting. One of the girls, named Veretta, wins the fight. Pinball goes to a man named Tattoo, who has fighters, and he agrees to organize a fight between Bone and one of the Tattoo's fighters. Before the fight begins, Bone notices his opponent's shoulder dropping upon landing. When the fight starts, Bone delivers a fatal blow and defeats his opponent with one punch. Pinball is thrilled and tells Tattoo that Bone could beat two fighters at once. Tattoo tells him the fighters are ready. Pinball feels involved and doubles the stakes. When the fight begins, Bone eliminates the first fighter with a powerful strike. Then he breaks the arm of the second fighter. Bone tells Tattoo that if he doubles the bet, he is ready to fight again. Tattoo calls for 10 fighters to battle. Bone manages to drive them all away with crushing blows. Bone forcefully takes the money from Tattoo as Tattoo points a gun at him. Veretta, captivated by Bone, gives him her phone number. Bone continues training, and then Pinball organizes street fights for him. Bone manages to win all the brawls. Bone and Pinball earn a lot of money and seem to become increasingly famous. Bone participates in high-risk fights and manages to win all of them. We see Bone returning to the hotel, and Tamara notices he has a slight injury. When she treats his wounds, Bone asks her about her children, and she tells him she has been taking care for them for nearly 3 years, but the child Gerard has been only looked after for a year. Tamara was a fan of Tachi. Bone teaches her the basics of the sport. The next day, she watches him teach Gerard the basics of the sport. James chases a girl in his car because he suspects that the girl leaked his information. The girl begs him not to hurt her, but James still drives over her, killing her. Roberto watches James's actions, and James tells Teddy to leave. Bone's fight date with Hammerman arrives. He and Teddy sit in the car, taking stimulants before facing Bone. Pinball tells James that Bone will win the fight. The fighters get ready to start the fight. Hammerman tries to hit Bone, but Bone is quick and dodges the blow. Then Bone hits Hammerman multiple times, and Hammerman cannot evade. Bone then knocks down Hammerman with a kick. Pinball announces Bone's victory, then goes to collect James's winning bet, making James very angry. Then James invites Bone to dinner to celebrate his victory. Pinball and Bone go to James's house, and when Bone sees the girl Angela, he stares at her. James notices this and commands Bone to come to his office with him. James tells Bone he respects all fighters, then shows him a samurai sword, but Bone tells him that he is not very good with swords. Then, James tells Bone about Franklin, telling him he is a major arms dealer. He tells Franklin runs an international fighting ring worth millions of dollars with a fighter who has never been defeated in any fight, and he wants to arrange a fight between him and this guy, which will cost $5 million. James tells Bone that if he defeats him, he will become a millionaire, and he will no longer need to fight. Bone tells him he will consider it. James notices that Bone is still watching Angela, who has been looking for the contraband James has hidden. James asks Angela to enter the room, trying to persuade Bone to join the fight. Angela walks into the room, but she grabs a gun and threatens Bone as he tries to approach her. But Bone knows her well as Danny's friend in prison. Before he was killed, he recommended her and his son. Bone's best friend Danny is Angela's husband, who was imprisoned because of James. James also hired a gang in prison to get rid of Danny. Bone blames Angela for what happened to her, but she tells him that James forced her to be with him after killing her husband and taking her son away, and only now she doesn't know where her son is. Bone tells her that he knows where her son is and he will take her to see him. Then the two go out and seem to have a great time together. Bone asks James if he can take Angela to live somewhere for a while. James agrees, and Bone takes Angela to a rehabilitation center for drug addiction treatment and promises to take her to see her son when she gets better. James goes to Franklin's mansion, and he takes $5 million to offer Franklin in exchange for arranging a fight between Bone and his boxer. At first, Franklin, speaking with racist overtones, refuses, but in the end, he agrees to arrange the fight, telling him that it would start in 3 days. Bone is surprised by the presence of the police, who found Roberto dead. Roberto's death devastates Tamara. Bone learns that it was James's men who killed Roberto because Roberto had witnessed James killing a girl. Bone stays with Tamara, comforting her. Bone is surprised to find James in the room. James is astonished that Bone could leave Angela, whom he had taken away, and sit with Tamara. He also tells him that he has arranged a fight with Franklin's boxer for him, but Bone tells James that he is still considering it, and after consideration, he refuses to fight, which shocks James greatly. James is furious, telling him that he has already paid $5 million as a stake. James is about to draw his sword, but is blocked and struck by Bone. James grabs Tamara, pointing a gun at her, and tells Bone that if he doesn't fight, he will kill her and all the children she is caring for. After James leaves, Bone tells Tamara to take the children and go somewhere else temporarily. Tamara has no other choice but to request that he not be around when she returns. James orders Teddy to drive Bone and Tamara away. Hammerman goes to see Pinball, asking where Bone is, then he hits Pinball, but Bone suddenly appears, kills Hammerman, and also manages to kill James's other henchmen. His daughter comes to James, informing him of Angela's whereabouts because she is receiving treatment in the same center. James sends Teddy to kill Angela, but when they enter the room, they find Pinball there with a gun pointed at them. Bone appears behind them, strikes them, and kills them, while Pinball also kills Teddy. When James tries to contact Teddy, Bone answers him, telling him that he has killed all his men and that he will also come for him. James sends his location to Bone, then calls Franklin, telling him the fight should happen today. Bone goes to Franklin's mansion, as that's the location James sent him. James enters to watch. Franklin and James, along with important figures, wait to watch the fight between Bone and Franklin's fighter. James tells Bone that if he refuses to fight, he will kill him. Bone tells James that he will kill him because he killed his imprisoned friend, Danny. James knows Bone wants to protect Angela. James admits he killed Danny and Roberto, but he doesn't know that Bone has been recording everything, and then he sends the video to Pinball, who tells the police about James's crime. Franklin's fighter arrives, saying he will kill Bone. Bone rises to fight back. Another fighter mocks Bone. The fight begins, and Bone knows his opponent is highly skilled. However, after delivering several heavy blows, Bone successfully wins. But Bone surrenders before the fight ends, which shocks everyone. James, furious and embarrassed, draws a sword, intending to kill Bone. Franklin orders his men to give Bone a sword so that the fight is fair. James is surprised to discover that Bone is skilled with a sword, contrary to what Bone had previously told him. Bone successfully cuts off James's arm and then flees the scene as the police arrive to arrest James, who is threatening Franklin and telling him he will betray him. After completing her treatment, Angela comes to the hotel because Gerard is her son and Tamara has raised him. Angela and her son are finally reunited. Tamara knows that Bone is the mastermind, and she knows that Bone came to the hotel to protect Gerard. Angela asks Bone to stay with them at the hotel, but Bone tells her his mission is over, and he asks her to allow Angela and her son to stay with her. After bidding them farewell, he leaves the hotel and also says goodbye to Pinball, telling him he will never fight again. James is locked up in the same prison where Bone was at the start of the movie. Franklin asks the gang to beat James after he threatens him. Thank you for watching.